Math with McComish, we're going to talk about experimental probability. So it is kind of what it sounds like. We're going to do an experiment and find out what the probability is. I'm going to do an example. I'm going to flip a coin 6 times and I'm going to record what happens. So here we go. Tails, tails, heads, tails, heads, and tails. So I did my experiment 6 times. I got tails 4 times and heads 2 times. So I would say my experimental probability of getting a tail is 4 out of 6. And for heads, it was only 2 out of 6. I did my experiment. I wrote down my probabilities as a fraction for this one. And that is experimental probability. So what it is the number of favorable outcomes over or divided by the number of trials. We can write them as a fraction, as a decimal, or a percent. So let's say we did this. You have a bag of marbles. They're blue, red, and green marbles. You select a marble and see what color it is, and then you put it back in. You do this 10 times, and 4 times you get blue. So the experimental probability would be of getting a blue marble would be 4 out of 10. So I could write that also as a decimal. If you remember, you can do the top divided by the bottom. This would just be 4/10, so 0.4. But if it's a difficult fraction, you can take the top, divide by the bottom to get your decimal. This would also equal 40%. So 40% of the time, you chose blue. And that's your experimental probability. Let's say you roll a 6-sided die 20 times. So a regular dice, you roll it 20 times. You get a 5 6 times. What's the experimental probability of rolling a 5? Well, if you got it 6 times out of 20 trials, you get a 6 out of 20. Okay, I could change that into a decimal. I could go 6 divided by 20. Or I could times by 5 to make it 100. So this would be 0.3 as a decimal, or 30%. So 30% of the time you got a 5. That would mean the probability of not getting a 5 would be 70% as well. So you could be asked questions based on these experiments that you might do. So that's experimental probability. I would encourage you to maybe play a game with experimental probability and just explore a little bit with that and see what you can come up with.